Hello, hi. So let's get started. Hello, everybody. Very good morning. So this is one of the first sessions today. Like we have 3 more coming in today from Google. 2 more dedicated to the enterprise world and a few more that are associated with mobile, etc. I'm Shashank. I'm the product manager for Google Identity for Work, and the work that we do in the identity space is what we're going to talk about. Today, this presentation is all about our customers from Netflix and Coke, and we're going to talk about how we've evolved in the identity space and on the cloud space to sort of make it easier for our customers to hook it to us. So this is all about our customers. With that, I think let's get started. The first part of this presentation is just going to be talking about what Google has to offer for its customers in terms of platform that they can reuse. And the next part of the presentation is about our customers, which is Netflix and Coke, really taking those platform features and resources and innovating on top of that so that life on the cloud is really easy. So with that, here we go. So Google Cloud Directory, it's like we've always been supportive of open standards, and we're part of a lot of standard groups, open standard working groups. With that, what we've done really is we started working on APIs like probably 10 years back, and the way we came into the market was with various administration APIs that we offered to our customers, right? So this is where we started. These APIs are available for you to sort of build upon in terms of the various resources which are extendable and discoverable. Users, groups, roles, that's what we really hand out with these APIs. And that's been standard, right? Going forward, what we have done is taken it a little bit forward, and on top of the APIs, now we've started offering services which we're trying to make richer as we go down the line. So the services that we're talking about here are like these, something like single sign-on, right? So last year, October 2015, is when we sort of announced Google as IDP for SAML, and we have always had our OIDC component in Google Apps Marketplace. So we support SSO via SAML and OIDC, and that's what we extend to our customers to sort of use further. Similarly, this year, we've actually gone ahead and increased the app catalog strength considerably, and we have all these players working along with us so that the integration with these players is simple. So if you were on the Google platform, you could just do a one-click sort of setup to get into these customers and start using them for your SSO services, right? So these are the SaaS apps that we are supporting. This is a continuous work. You'll see a lot more SaaS apps being integrated into our app catalog. The ones which I mentioned here are SAML. Obviously, Google Apps Marketplace has like hundreds of OIDC apps as well. And finally, this year, we're going to come out with custom attributes on the front end as well. We've always offered them on the APIs. What we're going to do is actually offer custom attributes on the front end as well. So that's upcoming work. You guys should be looking out for that as well. Going forward, I think Kristen is going to give a talk on security today, but I'm just going to highlight some of the stuff that we've done this year, just on a high level, which is our work in an unphishable, which we are going to come out with, which is adhering to FIDO standards. That's what's new. All the other 4 pieces that you see over there, which is risk analysis, 2SV, security keys, and passwordless identify first flow, is what we've been bringing throughout the years. And last year, we were talking about identify first flows, right? So that's a story on security, and we extend this to mobile devices as well. And that's a story on unphishable that will unfold today. So look forward to you guys attending that session as well. Going forward, user provisioning. So this is something that we are really excited about, and we're going to come out with this in the latter part of the year, which is we have adopted SCIM as a standard. So on top of our services, we are encouraging like a lot of SaaS apps to support SCIM so that we can provision users as an IDP and make it as easy as possible for them. Later in the evening, we have a session which talks about all these features that we have in the provisioning space. We're going out with 3 apps in the trusted tester mode right now, and we want to go like, we probably would reach general availability later in the year in a couple of months, right? So that's the story in provisioning. So overall, like, I just wanted to leave you with this imprint, which is like Google is continuously investing in its enterprise services and resources. And this is how we look at our IDaaS platform, which is like we have directory, we have SSO, we've got security, provisioning, and obviously we have mobile device management as well. And that's the sphere that we're investing in continuously. And our customers, what you're going to hear in the next talk is like Netflix is going to come up and say how they've actually gone ahead and utilized at least 3 of these areas to make their life much more simpler on the cloud. With that, I'd like to sort of call upon the customer, which is Netflix. John is here from Netflix, Jonathan Hurd. He can further explain how Netflix has taken Google as an IDP and made their lives easier. Welcome, John.
Okay, hello. I'm Jonathan Hurd from Netflix. I'm an enterprise architect on our identity and access management team. Just like many of you guys have heard the same story, the kind of, oh my God, so many logins, so many directories, so much diversity that's not good. It was a very confusing user process, confusing for developers, confusing for our users. We set out about a year ago, about a year to this date, to actually simplify that process. We were a Google Apps customer, and our users were familiar with the process, familiar with the sign-in, and familiar with a lot of the components around Google. So breaking down the barriers was key, and switching over everything that we knew about, Active Directory, Open LDAP, all of it to go to Google Cloud, or the Google Cloud Identity. I'm sorry, I've had a lot of coffee, so I talk kind of fast. So looking again at the old, we had multiple sources of employee identity. This is just employee identity. We also, and my team only works with the employee and partner side, but our employee identity was scattered around multiple databases, multiple sources of LDAP, and again, confusing for users, confusing for developers. We also had several cases where if you give a developer an LDAP endpoint that does allow unencrypted, they will send it over, and that was a continuous problem. We had simple SAML set up, more your commodity SSO, where you could have, where people could do SAML to like Dropbox and whatnot. But Netflix has about 400 internal applications, most of those being partner applications or engineering applications. So we needed something else to kind of carry the identity transaction through all of our apps and secure all of our apps in that case. Something that would handle browser-based and API authorization-based. And we also had lots of reliability concerns, trying to make sure that all these LDAP databases, all these our SaaS solutions, everything that we had reliability issues with them. So what we came up with was basically let's plunge ahead and let's try to make Google as our primary auth provider. We knew we couldn't do that directly by only utilizing Google. So we used Ping as our identity broker and bridge, more as a frontline integration point for all of our apps. Google would source as our auth provider, but we would use Ping as a means to delegate authentication and provide step-up authentication where needed. We built a dynamic and reliable infrastructure, and we used both Google 2FA and Duo Security to add mid-level session control. As you probably know, with any kind of consumer Google account, the Google session always wins, and it's basically never ending. So we had to have means of actually applying kind of more session control using alternative 2FA methods. I'll go through this real quick. This is our deployment, our continuous deployment integration pipeline setup. There's not really too much I want to go through in there. This is the basic setup of most of our that most users will actually go through. So a user hits a web app. The web app will either through OIDC or SAML redirect to Ping Federate, and then Ping Federate then delegates to Google Auth using their OIDC implementation. And then on the back end, we're making the standard OIDC user info call to grab the base set of attributes for a user. And then finally, we're making 2 additional calls. They're kind of more custom. Pretty much the only part that we've actually done that's custom is the custom Google data stores. And all that's doing is making 2 API calls on behalf of users to grab user data and groups data. And that is done on the back end during a user's transaction. How we use the Google directory, just like many other directories, the Google directory has a fantastic API subset. We utilize their admin SDKs and basically synchronize most of our HR attributes from Workday to the Google directory. Just like Active Directory and other directories, Google has concepts of hidden and public attributes. It has OUs, it has the whole 9 yards. So a lot of this stuff was not that hard to translate from a traditional directory to a cloud-based directory. Self-service group creation was very big for us. So in the new world, we wanted to have it so less tickets going to help desk, less tickets going to application owners to give me access. We wanted to be more open. I think the key thing was if I'm an app owner, I want to add these engineers to my app to have access to it. I should be the one doing that. I can create a group and I can govern access for my own applications. That also comes into play where, let's say there's an app that I want to use, but I don't know if I have permission. I should be able to request access myself, not go through a request process with the ticketing system, and then the ticketing system gets forwarded off to another team, and then another team, and then finally you get access. Here it's all done within the Google Groups console, and we just base all of our ACLing off of Google Groups. These groups are not public, they are private, and most of the time we do use some kind of separation. There's 2 different types of Google Groups. There's admin and user created. So if I were as a regular user to go create a group, it would show up as a designated user created group. But for something more like a SOX application that needs privileged access, that would be something that you would have someone on the Google admin side create a group for you and have more tighter controls around that. We also extended the user schema. Google allows you to customize your schema however you want. They do allow anything from multi-value to complex types. They basically allow you everything that you could probably do in kind of like an Active Directory or LDAP world. And like I said earlier, you can flag less sensitive attributes as public so anyone could read them, or others you can give it to admin-only views. Kind of going more over the thing, we synchronize from Workday. We have a bunch of basically Python and .NET processes that kind of handle our provisioning flow from Workday, user creation, attribute sync, and deprovisioning. I think the key things is we have automation to create the basics, so like department groups, location groups, and application groups. A lot of that we handle ourselves, so someone with an HR designation of IT goes in an IT group the day that they're hired, stuff like that. So then you can have an application that's based on only members of the IT department group. That's kind of the flow right there. And so the first step, kind of I alluded to earlier, is building the user claim data for a transaction. The first part is we hit the Google's OIDC user info endpoint, part of the OIDC process, and we grab just the basic data. This is the same data if you were to go out to the consumer grade OpenID Connect implementation that Google has. There's no difference. We're using the same OpenID Connect implementation. The only extra part is, like I said, we actually hit their user API first, grab the base set of attributes that they allow, and then also our extended custom schema. And then the final part is grabbing what we really use for ACLing is the groups endpoint. Groups, the tough part about groups with Google is they don't at least from the API point, they aren't transitive or they aren't nested. You don't get a nested visibility, so we keep all of our ACLing groups flat. That can be a little bit of a difficulty if you've been building on that in an Active Directory world for many years. But when you query a group's endpoint at Google, you only will get back, for a user, you will only get back their direct memberships. You won't get any transitive groups. So that's the big thing that we had to keep in mind and kind of build around. We built a naming convention around our groups. We used Meacham, which is named after a character with Netflix, and SG being security group, and then the app name, the app environment, and the role. And a lot of, we have several apps using this. Mainly, most of our apps are actually based off of using this kind of naming convention. And something like Safari Books is, this is key because Safari Books is a case where you have licenses that are really expensive and you're paying by use. So let's say I'm not going to want to provision licenses for every user across the company, but only if they need it. So provide a way for a user to go join a group if they need access to Safari Books. Once they do, they get access to a portal and they can single sign on to Safari Books. They'll use it for a period of time, kill the license if they stop using it, and then they can rejoin the group and get a new license. But you aren't continually paying a license for every user that's in the company that's not using it. And this was kind of the big part we wanted. We wanted self-service for our users and to kind of help with licensing, for ACLing, for pretty much everything. We wanted to get away from ticketing, and that's kind of a big part of it all. For AWS, we have something, I think we're actually now around 50 accounts and 4 roles each. We use a bit of Ping Federate's expression language and to transform a Google group name into an AWS role name. But all of our roles for AWS are Google groups. And so when anytime anyone needs access to an AWS role in a particular account, our security organization goes and adds them to that particular group, and they get access instantly through the AWS SAML connection. And so both of these things, I'm going to give a quick demo in a second, but we have a portal. It's a single page app. It's the same thing. Again, we're basing it off of groups. If you aren't a member of one of these groups, you don't get access to see the application. You don't get access to go to the application. It's pretty simple as that. Some of these are self-service where you can self-join. Some of these are a little bit more locked down where you have to actually request access to join. And session control is a big thing. So the Google session cookie always wins. This is good and bad. The good part is we don't maintain any state really that we care about on our Ping Federate installation. So that means we can quickly cycle versions. We can quickly iterate on what we're on a new build and not have to be tied down to killing all of our sessions for our users. The good thing is we don't mind if the user goes through a quick round trip time with Google or with Google each time. As long as they have the Google session cookie, then we're fine with that. They won't be reprompted, but they won't notice that their Ping Federate session was killed somewhere in the process. That becomes a problem for sensitive applications where Google will only prompt you for two-step upon first initial login, and then after that, you're kind of SOL. So if you go to a privileged application, there's no way to really step up. So we use Duo Security for that, and we just apply step-up authentication where available or where needed, and that's worked out pretty well for us. And now we're starting to get in the point where we start using big data to not only prompt on anomalies ourselves, not only when Google sees it, because Google will prompt an anomaly they will force you to log out if you are seen coming from somewhere else that you're halfway across the country seen as anomalous. The big thing for this is Google's APIs around reporting and auditing were pretty significant. And so we use that data in conjunction with the ping frederick data to build pretty much a full-scale transaction of our users. The good thing is that any time that we were already using the same information to get token and scope information out of when a user is using their Google account to access a third-party market item, now we have that visibility along with all of our internal application usage. It's helped us out drastically. As I'm running out of time, I'm going to do a quick demo, which I'm going to kind of talk through the part. I did this at 6 a.m. this morning, so bear with me. Okay, so this is me going to our application launcher portal, struggling to type in my email this morning. And this is the standard flow that if you haven't logged into Google, you'll get prompted for 2FA. In this case, I'm using a security key to log in. So kind of mentioned the use case I mentioned earlier. I'm looking for Safari books. I'm just typing it kind of wrong, but eventually I'm looking for Safari books. I don't have access. Luckily, I've bookmarked the link to the Google group so I can easily join it. And I'm joining the group. We're not smart enough yet to actually refresh it for the user, so we ask them to log out. And it's relogging in. As you'll see, the next time I'm not prompted for my 2SV. Now I have Safari books, I have access. That is the case of, that's pretty much the net and shell. We use Google Groups for things like this. I'm going to show you, this is me going to the AWS console, a sensitive application. Google's not going to prompt me for step-up authentication, so we apply mid-level session control with Duo. And then I have AWS Roles based off of my Google Groups. As you see, I'm kind of going between lots of different apps here at Netflix, and I'm using one Google session. I'm not asked to not reprompted. It's my Google cookie session is winning across the whole gambit. Here I'm logging into a VPN. Again, Google wouldn't have prompted me after the first time, so we have to apply mid-level session control. And lastly, this is kind of a terrible demo, but this is me actually querying an internal resource for AWS access keys that based on Google Groups, on the same Google Groups data and the same connection data that the web console was based off of. Again, those are short-lived access keys, so those are no longer valid. And I guess I do have a couple more minutes. So kind of lessons learned. Don't get rate limited. We learned this really quickly. Actually, we had already gone production before we actually learned this. But Google is notorious for rate limiting their users if you don't know the ways around it. There's an additional parameter called quota user that is very friendly to get you around this. So basically, Google will treat you, if you're coming from like a natted environment, as one user, unless you actually use a quota user parameter. They'll see everything coming from the same IP, the same natted IP, and they'll rate limit you. So in our case, we were production live, doing okay, and then we started doing additional performance testing, and we hit a completely separate cluster, and when we started hitting it, Google saw this all as one user and basically throttled all of our regular production users. We didn't find out until soon after that. You can just supply a basic parameter there that basically bypasses that. Basically, you give the user that actually is making the call, and you include that with all your Google API requests. It's a very easy way to get around Google's API limits and throttling. As I mentioned earlier, nested groups is a big concern. There's the lack of it. A Google group, you can have multiple subgroups under that, but that only works for certain applications. That'll work for your Drive, that'll work for email. You can give people access by using transitive groups, but when you query via API, the group members for a particular user, you only get direct memberships. Hopefully that gets solved someday, but for right now, that is the case, and just keep groups flat, and you should be safe. Admin versus user-created groups, that's a big one for us. Basically, anything sensitive, we keep in the admin space. On the user space, anyone can create a group, but that also becomes a big issue when you start getting so many groups. The fact that anyone can create a group for anything being like any kind of softball league, whatever, you start to get tens of thousands of groups. Now, when you try to actually start giving that kind of data to an application, if you want to just send all group memberships to an application and let them do ACLing based on that, you're instantly going to hit header sizes limits, cookie size limits along the way. So the best way to do that is to scope down to admin-created groups. In our case, when an application is brought online and brought into our ecosystem, we create a group automatically for them, and the user, and then make the application owner the owner of that group. That way, it's a little bit more toned down than someone just creating a softball league group and that being sent along with the user claim data. OU structures, as far as users, it's just like Active Directory. You can get as deep as you want, and you can do policies based off of those. The problem is with groups. There is no OUs for groups, so you can't say, I'm going to give claim data for only department IT admins and the groups underneath that. You have to actually when you query Google for groups, you get all groups no matter what. Unless you can do some filtering based on names and other things, but there's no such thing as OUs for groups on the Google side. The last one is probably the most important, hosted domain. This is a way, so if you've been in any of the sessions about account chooser, Google, if you have multiple accounts signed in with Google and you go to a Google login prompt, you'll get the ability to switch between those two. So let's say if I'm trying to log a user in at Netflix to a Netflix application, but they also have their personal Gmail account already in an account chooser. I don't want them to click on the personal Gmail because that's ultimately going to send them down a loop that's they're going to get faulted on, and they basically won't get access to anything. So as long as you supply a parameter called HD equals the name, the domain that you're trying to authenticate the user on, it'll completely bypass the Gmail account, and it'll only send them down your corporate enterprise account. That's a very nice way, but the thing that you kind of need to keep in mind is that you're sending that as part of your authorization request to Google. That is subject to being compromised or some kind of a man-in-the-middle attack along the way, so you must validate, as always, that what you send is what it comes back in your request. It just comes back as an HD equals, and that's what you need to validate on. And that's pretty much all I got. Sorry, did I talk fast enough?